What we're seeing in countries like South Africa, but many other parts of the world, is the merging of the political elite with criminal elements amongst the economic elite, or the criminalisation really of the economic elite, who are willing to do business at any cost with what's been termed politically exposed people, people who have political connections and are up to dodgy dealings. And we're seeing corruption on an industrial scale taking place around the world. And that's what state capture is. South Africa went through a period of 10 years under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma, where this phenomenon became a major feature of our society at a global level. McKinsey and Company operate within 65 different governments around the world. They operate as an international civil service. KPMG works with hundreds of governments around the world. You have huge international law firms which work as lobbyists for governments around the world. This is how the world has changed. These companies, these huge multinational corporations, given the profitability of crisis which kicked in 2008, now operate in very distinct and pervasive ways inside states around the world. And they sign off on this corrupt relationship, this merger between the private and the public sectors. They give it legitimacy. And that's what is universal in essence about this story. It's not a South African phenomenon. It's not an African leaders, black corrupt leaders story. This is the downward spiral of capitalism in crisis. Access to these types of films is always a massive struggle. The company that I'm associated with has a reputation of doing some very upstanding, sterling work, and that's helped open doors, but it also helps close doors. People are a bit fearful of us that, we're somehow going to do them in one form or the other. So working with politicians is always a tricky dance, and anybody who's got a public profile, because they need to know what part they're playing in this film in some ways. What do they represent in terms of your dramaturgy? And we needed clarity to find clarity on that ourselves. We were making this film as the story was unfolding, as people were coming into the public spotlight. We were attempting to reach out to them, so that delayed things. Many people wanted to go before the Commission of Inquiry before they spoke to us, but it was the dates were getting delayed and delayed and delayed. It was taking years. Some people had been waiting for a year to come before the Commission of Inquiry. So it was not easy. Obviously, we had many of the perpetrators of this, people who are linked to this crime, this heist on our state, weren't willing to talk to us. We maintained communication for many months. Many thousands of words were spent in communication with a host of individuals that we were hoping that would appear. All of them really, bar one or two, refused to participate in the documentary. And that meant we had to rely on archive, which proved itself, the value of the rand and so on, the cost of this archive, hugely expensive, process. I think it was almost in the realm of $50,000 that we had to spend on archive. There were no threats made. I think what was going in our favour was most of the damning evidence was now in the public domain, and we had the likes of the American government determining that no one should do business with any of the three Gupta brothers, no American citizen or no American institution, and essentially blacklisting them. And that happened shortly before the film came out. So I think that put the nerves of our lawyers at ease. You always have to be very careful, you know, insurance required. When you go up against people with deep pockets, you need to make sure that you're covered legally and you're all covered, and the broadcasters are covered with insurance. So that's how we resolved that one. I think the biggest challenge really was that this is a huge story and it could have gone in any one of 100 directions. And staying disciplined, working out actually what do we want to say with this story was critical, because as these leaks became, you know, evident and we knew one story after the other threatens to take you in a whole range of directions. So, you know, we do have such a thing called a budget, and we had to make sure that we were not running here, there and everywhere, and stayed focused on what our story was. Now, and providing clarity of that story. And we decided to cover those stories, which provided a clear clarity of the modus operandi of this heist, to characterize the people behind this heist, to show the dilemmas and threats that the heist posed to the country. And that meant, you know, stopping the temptation to get dragged all over the place was, I think, was probably the biggest challenge. To continually remind ourselves of, you know, what are we wanting to say, and has that changed by the stories we're hearing? And so we had to constantly question ourselves as to what was our message, and that determines the shape and content of your film, any decent documentary film. Reading these stories as they came out in the press, talking to many people, we interviewed over 65 people, hearing the first-hand stories of their interaction with the Guptas, was sickening. The way, the crass manner in which these people exercised their power over our politicians, over their employees, over anyone who they felt they had leverage because of their special relationship with Jacob Zuma, which was mediated through his son, Duduzane, was appalling. It was depressing, in fact. I mean, it felt like we were heading for a headlong rush towards a banana state, a banana republic. That's how it felt. And for me personally, you know, I grew up with a family, political family, spent 25 years in exile. The toll that had on my family, and the many tens of thousands of political activists in exile and in Zaire, you know, in South Africa, the sacrifices that were made for this. Zuma, at the end of the day, was forced out of office by the African National Congress because he became a political liability. it's clear that they could not continue their process of denial, or whether these massive trove of hundreds of thousands of emails and a mountain of evidence was real, or fake or not. That's what they tried for a number of months, but it was clear that the wave of evidence was far too strong for them to continue to act as if they're in denial as a ruling party. And that's why we saw the change at the conference where Zuma's faction was kicked out of power and Cyril Ramaphosa was put in place. It's not over. Many of those people, as I say, are still in power. Many of those people are still very influential inside the African National Congress. They still, I would argue, the corrupt factions inside the African National Congress remain in a majority. So there's still lots at stake. The question is, what can we learn as a country from this episode? What will the ruling party learn? What will our political culture, how will our political culture change as a result of this episode? What will the impact of COVID-19 have on our society? Our unemployment levels are going to go through the roof. Our economy is going to go through the floor. Every cent in our fiscus needs to be accounted for and to be treated responsibly. But we have still got this network, this patronage network inside our state-owned enterprises, inside our own government. Today we've just found out that they abused the repatriation scheme to bring people home and to put them in quarantine. We've just had another massive stimulus package outlined, and we're going to need more. And there will be these very same people, like vultures, trying to scavenge on this package which is supposed to really help the people. But what have we seen? A package which vast majority of the money goes to business, not the people. And we've got to start centering the people in each and every equation. And that's where we've gone wrong in South Africa. COVID-19 represents the opportunity to do this again properly, to make sure that this money is spent in the right way. But it also represents a threat that this money again could be stolen by those people who've based their whole political project on a patronage network linked to former President Jacob Zuma.